Hello everyone and welcome to the Week 12 Waiver Wire Show. My name is Dylan Burd here on the Sports Burd podcast, and we're normally live for this show, but not this week. We are just doing a normal video, but we will do what we normally do. We will go through all 32 teams. We will discuss injuries that happened this week, and we will discuss waiver wire options from each NFL team. So if you're new to this channel, just wanted to let you know that this is a new channel. I formed it in the fall, and every single Tuesday I do this waiver wire show. Every single Friday on this channel I do a college football betting show. Also on Fridays over on Sal Vetri's YouTube channel, I have a NFL player prop show. So be sure to check all that out. Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you aren't already. And be sure to like this video because it really helps me out long term. And in addition, comment what players you're targeting on the waiver wire this week. We are getting right down the home stretch of fantasy football. Only 3 weeks left for me before I hit my playoffs. Possibly 2 weeks depending on what size league you are in. So getting really excited for that. We're right down the home stretch. You got to hit your waiver wire, bids now because you don't have that much time left to make an impact on your roster. Also wanted to remind you that if you haven't already, be sure to follow me on Twitter at sports_bird. Now let's get started. So we start in the AFC East as we always do, and we have the New York Jets that actually played a decent game against the Los Angeles Chargers. I was pretty surprised. I was honestly pretty nervous because, if you've been watching these videos a few weeks, you know that I am a Jets fan. I'm in full tank mode right now, rooting for the tank. I want Trevor Lawrence. I want 0-16. They scared me a little bit. I thought the Chargers were going to blow another game, and I thought the Jets were going to come back. Didn't happen, fortunately for us. We are now 0-10, just 6 losses away from locking in Trevor Lawrence. So pretty nervous, but decent feeling to be a Jets fan actually right now, knowing that your franchise could be changed in a few months if you just lose the next 6 games. But that being said, not to get away from the topic here, the waiver wire. We have quarterback Sam Darnold, who missed Week 11 with a shoulder injury. Running back Michael Pirine left the game with a knee injury. Then we have Denzel Mims, the rookie from Baylor, a guy who this was only his 4th game of the season. He missed the first few weeks of the season with a hamstring injury. Then, just kept missing weeks, finally gets on the field, and he's looked pretty good. 3 receptions for 71 yards, also had 8 targets, which led the team, and a 28.6% target share. He's currently less than 5% owned in fantasy. If you haven't watched these videos, I just take ownership from ESPN.com, but just wanted to let you know, if there's a way that I could find ownership in season-long leagues across every single platform and put it all together, if there's a website that does that, please let me know. I will definitely look into that in the future, but right now this is just going based off of ESPN season-long leagues where he's less than 5% owned. If you're in a deep league, Denzel Mims could be an option. This guy is a beast. He was bringing in the most absurd catches. These 3 catches, all of them were really impressive. And I don't know whether it's just Joe Flacco at quarterback, what will happen when Sam Darnold comes back potentially next week, but Mims is definitely a guy that if you're in a deep league, you want to take a look at. Also wanted to mention wide receiver Brashad Perriman, 2 for 54 and a touchdown on 4 targets. Is this a Joe Flacco thing? Maybe, because if we remembered, Brashad Perriman went for 5 catches, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the Jets' last game against the Patriots on Monday night. Yeah, he's looked really good. It may only be because Joe Flacco is a quarterback. He may not be the same when Sam Darnold is back, but another guy you should probably take a look at. Look, I've been saying stay away from the Jets for a long time, but they've looked significantly better offensively the last 2 games, so maybe that you could get a decent amount of production out of these wide receivers for these last few weeks if you're in that desperate of a situation. Now moving on to the Miami Dolphins, we had Myles Gaskin once again miss Week 11 with a knee injury. Not sure when he's coming back yet, but it should be kind of soon. But for now, we had the running back snap share where we had Malcolm Perry getting 78.7% of the snaps, but he's really just a receiving running back. Didn't actually have any carries, had 3 receptions for 23 yards on 5 targets. Then you had Salvon Ahmed coming in with 67.2% of the snaps, 12 for 43 rushing, 5 for 31 receiving on 6 targets. And then Patrick Laird coming in 24.6% of the snap share, 1 reception for 8 yards receiving. So if you are a Gaskin owner, or if you're just a regular fantasy player out there that does not own Gaskin, Ahmed obviously is going to be the guy until Gaskin comes back. That being said, Ahmed is already owned in most leagues after his performance the last 2 weeks. Now, another guy that I had mentioned that, is currently the wide receiver 2 on Miami, whose fantasy potential could take a potential uptick because of Preston Williams' injury. We have wide receiver Jakeem Grant. He only had 2 catches for 12 yards on 6 targets in this game, had a much better week last week. Just a name to keep an eye on. Just wanted to throw him in there. Now moving on to the New England Patriots, we have Rex Burkhead, who left the game with a torn ACL. Not good for him. Hope he gets better soon. Running back snap share, we have Damian Harris getting 57.6% of the snaps, 11 for 43 and a touchdown rushing, 1 for 11 receiving. Then we have James White, who got 37.9% of the snaps, 5 for 19 rushing, 6 for 64 receiving on 9 targets. So you saw with Rex Burkhead out, James White received an increase in snaps. Obviously, played a much bigger role in the passing game as well. So James White is a name that is probably still owned in most PPR leagues, but a guy that is probably going to see an increase in production in the weeks going forward. So if he was dropped due to his lack of production the last some odd weeks, then be sure to take a look at him. Rex Burkhead, before he got hurt, 16.7% of the snaps, 4 for 7 rushing, 2 for 5 receiving on 3 targets. And then wide receiver Jacoby Myers, another guy that's been picked up in a ton of leagues, but we've been talking about them the last few weeks, so I decided I'd throw him in there. 3 for 38 receiving on 3 targets, not one of his better games. And then the Buffalo Bills were on a bye this week. And that does it for the AFC East. So now we will move on to the AFC North. Now the AFC North, we have running backs J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram, who actually tested positive right after the game on Sunday night for COVID-19. They will be out on Thursday night in the Thanksgiving game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But to talk about this week, we had the running back snap share. We had J.K. Dobbins, who looks like he's finally taken over that starter role, 63.5% of the snaps, 15 for 70 and a touchdown rushing, 2 for 15 receiving. We have Gus Edwards getting 20.6% of the snaps, 3 for 6 rushing, and then Mark Ingram, 7.9% of the snaps, 2 for 2 rushing. Gus Edwards is my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week. He is a must-add with these 2 guys out. He's probably going to get somewhere close to 100% of the snaps. The other running back is Justice Hill, who will probably get some snaps, but Gus Edwards is going to get the majority of the snaps, if not closer to 75-80%. And even though they are playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a very, very tough defense, the Ravens run the ball well. They ran the ball well against the Steelers last time, and Gus Edwards is probably going to be in for a ton of touches on Thanksgiving night. So he is my number 1 waiver wire pickup of the week. Be sure to grab him. Now moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, we had running back Joe Mixon, who missed week 11 once again with a foot injury. Unfortunately, was placed on IR. He will now be out until week 14. So if you are a Joe Mixon owner, which I am, in 2 leagues, I am sorry for you, because these backups, even if you own Gio Bernard or Samaje Perine, these are not guys that are really going to replace Mixon's production at all. I know Gio Bernard had a few good weeks, but he's not somebody that I feel like I could rely on. That being said, guys owned in most leagues, it's not like he's a guy you're going to pick up at this point, but just worth mentioning, the running back snap share, 56.1% for Bernard, 9 for 18 rushing, 4 for 37 receiving, and then Samaje Perine, 43.9% of the snaps, 5 for 19 rushing, 1 for 2 receiving. Also, quarterback Joe Burrow left the game with a torn ACL, torn MCL, will be out for the season. All I want to say is prayers to Joe Burrow. Hope he makes a full recovery. But if you're looking at this in terms of fantasy outlook, these wide receivers such as T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, guys who've had great years, obviously with Ryan Finley at quarterback the rest of the year, their fantasy value will plummet, similarly to the Cowboys where you had guys like CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. Once Dak got hurt, all their values plummeted as well. Unfortunate, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins having great seasons, as is Joe Burrow in his rookie year. So should be interesting to monitor that situation going forward. Hope Joe Burrow gets better. But that's all I got for the Cincinnati Bengals. Then I move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Nothing to talk about in terms of injuries, in terms of waiver wire. 10-0, so good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to move on from them, though. Not much to talk about there. But the Cleveland Browns, in terms of the running back snap share, which we have been monitoring all year, we had Kareem Hunt getting 52.3% of the snaps, 13 carries for 11 yards and a touchdown rushing, 1 reception for 10 yards receiving, and then Nick Chubb, 46.2% of the snaps, 20 for 114 rushing. Nick Chubb, he had a pretty cool look. He had no arm sleeves. It was raining outside. No arm sleeves, no gloves. Just looked like an absolute baller out there, but just a really cool look for a running back. I know Scott Hansen on Red Zone referred to it as the Jamal Lewis look, which I thought was a great comparison, pretty funny. But 2 leading wide receivers in this team to move on. Kadar Hodge and Rashard Higgins. This team has zero passing game whatsoever. Baker Mayfield has not had a good year. Odell Beckham is out. Jarvis Landry isn't producing that much. So these receivers, not even worth looking at all, in my opinion. But moving on now from the AFC North to the AFC South, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, another team where there's not a lot to talk about. This is a pretty light waiver week, so a lot of teams there's not going to be much to talk about. Look, I tried to find things to talk about. There's not a ton, though, in terms of waiver wire, in terms of injuries for a lot of these teams this week. It is a pretty light waiver week. That being said, the Jacksonville Jaguars had quarterback Gardner Minshew out once again with a thumb injury. As a result, Jake Luton filled in. He was horrible through 4 interceptions. The Jaguars only put up 3 points against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let's just say that the Jaguars with one win, better hope that Gardner Minshew comes back, or they're going to end the season at 1-15. By the way, this is what I'm worried about as a Jet fan who's rooting for the tank. Jacksonville could easily go 1-15, and Jacksonville actually has the tanking tiebreaker over the New York Jets due to easier strength of schedule. So if Jacksonville goes 1-15 and the Jets go 1-15, the Jags will win the Trevor Lawrence race. But it's definitely something to watch out for. But that being said, in terms of the fantasy aspect, this team is so bad, there's not much to talk about in terms of injuries, in terms of waiver wire either, especially with Gardner Minshew out. Now moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, we have the running back snap share, which we've been following all year. Those 3 running backs who seemingly, it depends on the week with all of them. I mean, some weeks one guy is going off, some week all 3 are going off. You don't really know what you're going to get. This week we had Jonathan Taylor, who got 52.7% of the snaps, 22 carries for 90 yards rushing, 4 for 24 receiving on 4 targets. Nyheim Hines grabbing 35.1% of the snaps, 6 for 2 rushing, 3 for 31 receiving on 4 targets. Pretty frustrating not to see Nyheim Hines grab a higher snap share this week after him dominating the Titans just a week ago, but I guess, the Colts are just going to do their thing, and they're going to go with the hot hand for the game, and that was Jonathan Taylor in this case. Also worth mentioning here, Jordan Wilkins, 12.2% of the snaps, 4 for 21 rushing, 1 for 15 receiving. And wide receiver Michael Pittman, the rookie out of USC, another great member of this great rookie class, 3 for 66 and a touchdown receiving on 3 targets. He's only 25.7% owned in leagues. Definitely one of my top waiver wire pickups this week. Pittman is going to continue to be the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver for this Colts team, especially when T.Y. Hilton has clearly taken a step back this season. So I expect Pittman to put up pretty good numbers the rest of the season. Now moving on to the Tennessee Titans, we have wide receiver Corey Davis, who had another great day, 5 for 113 receiving on 7 targets. He's still less than 50% owned, though, across fantasy leagues. So he's been very solid this season, been very consistent, except for one game against the Bears where he had a 0. But other than that, he's been hovering around that 10 to 15 range every game in PPR leagues. Look, I think this is a guy that if he's still available in your league you need wide receiver depth, you have to pick up Corey Davis. He's a guy that you could plug into your lineup and you could honestly feel comfortable about it at this point. He's having a really solid year and he's been consistent, so I trust Corey Davis for sure. Moving on to the Houston Texans, we have running back David Johnson, who missed the game again with a concussion. He cannot return until week 13. He actually is on IR. Wide receiver Randall Cobb also left the game with a toe injury, so just something to monitor there. It looks like Randall Cobb could be out a while, so something to monitor if you're looking at Brandon Cooks or Will Fuller in DraftKings next week. They could see an increase in targets. But also, running back Duke Johnson, who is filling in for David Johnson, had 10 for 15 rushing, 3 for 20 receiving on 76.8% of the snaps. I know Duke Johnson was a major pickup a couple of weeks ago. He's just, honestly, he hasn't performed, and I just don't think Duke Johnson is that good of a player, and I think that's why he's not producing. It's as simple as that. He's getting the snaps, he's getting the opportunities, he's just not producing. Now moving on to the AFC West, not much to talk about in terms of the Kansas City Chiefs. There never is, except for the fact that they're that good. They're just unreal. But moving on to the Chargers here, running back Austin Eckler expected to return in Week 12 from that hamstring injury that he's been out for a while from, but just to look at the running back snap share replacing him this week, we had Kalen Ballage getting 66.2% of the snaps, 16 for 44 rushing, 7 for 27 receiving on 9 targets, and then Troyman Pope, 19.5% of the snaps, 3 for 4 rushing, 2 for 12 receiving, and Joshua Kelly, who's really fallen out of favor with Anthony Lynn and the Chargers, 14.3% of the snaps, 4 for -2 rushing, and 2 for 4 receiving. So clearly Ballage is the guy if Eckler does remain out next week. Now Ballage is owned in most leagues as a result because this has been the last few weeks at this point. But I do expect Eckler to be back next week for Week 12, which is great to see for the Chargers. Now moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders, we have wide receiver Nelson Aguilar, a guy who's been on and off of this waiver wire list throughout the year. he's just inconsistent, and that's his main problem. He had 6 for 88 and a touchdown on 9 targets, which led the team 31% target share in this game. He's just above 10% owned across all season-long leagues on ESPN. He's a hit-miss guy. Like, that's the reason why. He'll either go for 0 or he'll go for 10 or 15. Like, that, there's no in-between with Aguilar, and that's why he's such a polarizing guy right now. He's not owned for a reason. He's just such a hit-or-miss guy, but if you need a wide receiver, he may be worth taking a shot on. If he does have an easy matchup in a game, then it may be worth, he could be a plug-and-play option if you do need that and you are running low on depth at wide receiver. So maybe worth a guy that, maybe a guy that you could take a shot on. But, keep an eye on him if you aren't ready to take a shot on him yet. Now, running back snap share for the Denver Broncos now. Melvin Gordon, 50.8% of the snaps, 15 for 84 and 2 touchdowns rushing. Phillip Lindsay, 42.9% of the snaps, 16 for 82 rushing. Not much to talk about there in terms of the running backs. I've just been monitoring the snap share because Gordon and Lindsay have been getting kind of a 50-50 type split. So just wanted to update you on that. Now, wide receiver KJ Hamler, I mentioned to keep an eye on him. He didn't have a great game against the Dolphins, 4 for 35 receiving on 6 targets, a 20% target share, though, which is definitely a great number. This is a guy, he's a rookie for Penn State. You got to keep an eye on him. He's just another member of this great rookie class, and the reason he's behind a lot of rookie wide receivers right now is not only because Drew Lock is his quarterback, but because he did miss a few weeks due to injury at the beginning of the season. But Hamler has been pretty good the last few weeks. Just keep an eye on him going forward. You don't need to pick him up yet. Just keep an eye on him. Keep him flagged. Now, moving on here to the NFC East, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I haven't even said anything about him in the last few videos because there hasn't been much to talk about, but I got to give credit where credit is due. Quarterback Andy Dalton, 22 for 32 passing, 203 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception in this game in which the Cowboys won against the Minnesota Vikings. Still not great, but if he could play decently like this, then the Cowboys positional players like CeeDee Lamb, like Zeke Elliott, like Amari Cooper, like Michael Gallup, those guys are going to gain some value back if he could even just put together decent performances like this. His next opportunity will be on Thanksgiving against the Washington football team. Moving on to the New York Giants, bye week for them. Moving on to the Washington football team, the running back snap share, which is basically all we've been talking about all season with them. Antonio Gibson, 54.1% of the snaps, 16 for 94 and a touchdown rushing, 1 for 10 receiving. J.D. McKissic, 52.5% of the snaps, 6 for 43 rushing, 3 for 26 receiving on 4 targets, which was a major drop in targets from the last 2 games where he's getting 14 to 15 targets. But Peyton Barber, 21.3% of the snaps, 8 for 28 rushing. Now here's the deal with the Washington football team. If they are close in a game or winning games, they're going to run the football with Antonio Gibson. If they are down and need to pass, then J.D. McKissic is going to be the guy because J.D. McKissic plays passing downs. Antonio Gibson does not. It's because of a pass blocking problem with Antonio Gibson that he does not see the field on passing downs or just plays that they're going to pass a lot. Even though he does get his receptions, but like a lot of designed passes, he is not in the game for. It is J.D. McKissic. That being said, I do expect Antonio Gibson to be really, really good against the Dallas Cowboys next week. I expect that to be a close game, and the Dallas Cowboys do not have a good defense. Gibson had a good game against them last time, so I expect a big game for Gibson as well on Thanksgiving. Now moving to the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that is an absolute disaster. Carson Wentz looks absolutely horrible, but it is worth mentioning that tight end Dallas Goedert did have a really good game, 5 for 77 and a touchdown, receiving 6 targets. He's still less than 60% owned, so you could possibly find him on the waiver wire if you still need a tight end pickup. I know if you're playing in ESPN leagues, you may have thought that Taysom Hill was the option at tight end. Now, Taysom Hill, as he should, loses his tight end eligibility in ESPN leagues this week. He will strictly be a quarterback, and as a result, if you were relying on Taysom Hill going forward at tight end, you cannot do that now. So if you're looking at the waiver wire, Dallas Goedert could be a guy if he's still available. He did play really well at the beginning of the season. Now, I know Zach Ertz may be coming back, but at this point in their careers, I think Goddard is the better player than Ertz, and I think Goddard will be getting a lot of receptions, yards, touchdowns, targets, pretty much everything. Goddard is a really good player, and I like him. So if you need a tight end, take a look there. Now, wide receiver Jalen Reagor, another guy from this rookie class from TCU. We were keeping an eye on him in the last few weeks. 4 for 52 receiving on 5 targets in this game. Not much to talk about there. Moving on to the NFC North, Now, this is a quick division. There's not much news for each team. For the Green Bay Packers, we have wide receiver Allen Lazard, who returned from a core muscle injury, 2 for 18 receiving on 4 targets. He was on a snap count in this game, so it is worth monitoring him. Again, another guy that you should not pick up yet, but another guy you should flag because Lazard was a legit fantasy option before he got hurt. Now he's come back. Valdez-Scantling has played a bigger role. Who is going to be the number 2 guy going forward? It could be Lazard. It could be Valdez-Scantling. We don't know, so just keep an eye on that situation going forward. The Chicago Bears did have a bye this week, so we're not going to talk about them. The Minnesota Vikings, not much to talk about in terms of injuries, in terms of waiver wire. And the Detroit Lions, we have wide receiver Kenny Golladay, who missed Week 11 with a hip injury. Running back DeAndre Swift, who missed Week 11 with a concussion. So these 2 guys are probably the Lions' best players right now, offensively for sure. So the Lions need both these guys back if they're going to beat Houston on Thanksgiving. Hopefully we will see both them. It will not only be better for the Lions, it'll be a lot more entertaining for us fantasy players. So hoping that they get back. But looking at the running back snap share with DeAndre Swift out, you had Kerryon Johnson grabbing 69.1% of the snaps, 6 for 17 rushing, 2 for 21 receiving on 5 targets. Adrian Peterson, 30.9% of the snaps, 7 for 18 rushing. The Houston Texans have a really, really bad defense, so Kerryon Johnson could be an interesting option if DeAndre Swift remains out, but I really don't think you could rely on either running back. Even with Swift out, you don't know who's going to get more carries. You don't know who's going to get more percentage of snaps. You don't know who's going to actually produce, or if any of them are actually going to produce. So just hope that DeAndre Swift comes back. I would not bank on Peterson. I would not bank on Kerryon Johnson, even if Swift is out, though, because you just don't know who's going to get that production. Moving on now to the NFC South, we have the running back snap share for Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, which we've been paying attention to the last few weeks. Fournette, even though Jones had a phenomenal week last week at Carolina, we have Fournette grabbing 59% of the snaps, 7 for 17 in the touchdown rushing, 1 for 9 receiving, and Ronald Jones 41%, 10 for 24 rushing. Not much to talk about here except for the fact that Ronald Jones should be getting a higher percentage of the snaps than Fournette. He's a better player at this point in their careers. He's just a lot more explosive. Also, Leonard Fournette had like 3 drops. It was pretty infuriating if you were watching the game, but not going to go into the Tampa Bay Bucks more so here. Atlanta Falcons, worth noting that the running back snap share this week, Brian Hill got the most percentage of the snaps, 40.7%, 4 for 18 rushing. Now Todd Gurley only got 39% of the snaps, 8 for 26 rushing, 1 for 3 receiving. Have a feeling a lot to do with this was just simply because they were getting killed. They needed to pass, so they went with Brian Hill instead of Todd Gurley. Not too much to talk about there. Not too much to, wait. You shouldn't wait that too much going forward. Gurley is still going to be the guy. But moving on to the New Orleans Saints, we have quarterback Drew Brees, who missed Week 11 with fractured ribs. He is on IR, so he will miss the next few weeks. And quarterback Taysom Hill, 18 for 33 passing, 233 yards, and then 10 for 51 and 2 touchdowns rushing. I have to say, Taysom Hill blew me away the other day. I didn't expect anything from him. I thought that Jameis should have 100% been the starter. I still do think that, but Taysom Hill, gotta give the guy credit, gotta give credit where credit is due. Taysom Hill played a phenomenal game, and honestly, if this guy has another game like this, now I know it was the Atlanta Falcons defense, so you can't wait too much. I'm really curious to see what this guy does next week, because if he's going to continue to run in multiple touchdowns per week while he's starting quarterback, he may just be worthy of a fantasy pickup. I don't really know, but just keep an eye on him. Taysom Hill, a lot of fun to watch also, so it should be interesting to see what he does in the game this week. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, we had running back Christian McCaffrey, who missed Week 11 with the shoulder injury. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater also missed Week 11 with a knee injury. P.J. Walker replaced him. P.J. Walker wasn't that bad, 24 for 34 passing, 258 yards and a touchdown, also threw 2 interceptions, but got the win most importantly over the Detroit Lions. Now looking at that running back snap share in place of Christian McCaffrey, 72.9% for Mike Davis, 19 carries, 64 yards and a touchdown rushing, 215 receiving, and then a guy named Rodney Smith, who actually is from, coming out of Minnesota from college, 12.9% of the snaps, 8 for 29 rushing. It looks like McCaffrey could very, very well and is supposed to miss Week 12 as well, so Mike Davis is going to be your guy once again. Now moving on to the last division here, we have the Seattle Seahawks, where we had running back Chris Carson missed the game once again with a foot injury, but we did have Carlos Hyde back, and as a result, Carlos Hyde, 69.4% of the snaps, 14 for 79 and a touchdown rushing, 2 for 16 receiving. Also, behind him, we had Bo Scarborough. That's a name you probably haven't heard in a while. The former Alabama running back, 19.4% of the snaps, 6 carries for 31 yards rushing. DJ Dallas, 9.7% of the snaps, 1 for 13 rushing, 2 for 19 receiving. Hyde should be owned by all Carson owners, and if the Carson owner isn't picking him up and you don't own Carson, just pick up Carlos Hyde anyway, if he's still available. But I really hope Chris Carson should be back. I do have him in a league that's, pretty important. I'm doing well in that league. So I really hope Chris Carson is back. It seems like he's pretty close to returning, so I do think that there's a chance he'll be back for week 12. If he's not, be sure to, own Carlos Hyde, and possibly be sure to start Carlos Hyde, because he seems like a pretty reliable option as long as he's healthy and as long as Chris Carson is out. So just a situation to monitor there in Seattle. Looking at the Arizona Cardinals, the only thing I could say there, the running back snap share, Chase Edmonds getting 52.4% of the snaps, 2 for 13 rushing, 4 for 36 and a touchdown receiving. Kenyon Drake getting 50.8% of the snaps, 11 for 29 rushing and a touchdown, 4 for 31 receiving. Also worth mentioning, Kyler Murray did suffer an AC joint injury in his shoulder, but should be fine to play next week, which is why I did not list him on the injury report here. San Francisco 49ers had a bye week this week, so not worth mentioning anything there. And for our last team that we're going to talk about, we have the Los Angeles Rams, a team that we've been monitoring strictly for their running back situation all season. Here on Monday Night Football, we had Darrell Henderson getting 45.8% of the snaps, 8 carries for 5 yards rushing, 2 for 4 receiving, and then Malcolm Brown, 37.5% of the snap share, 3 for 20 rushing, 1 for 8 receiving. And Cam Akers, the rookie from Florida State, 16.7% of the snaps, 5 for 15 rushing, 1 for 4 receiving. Also had a touchdown receiving in this game. But, with Cam Akers, I really hope that he gets a higher percentage of the snap share going forward, because I do think he's a lot better than Malcolm Brown. Darrell Henderson, maybe not so much, but Cam Akers could provide a lot to this Los Angeles team. So I'm curious to see that after scoring a touchdown on Monday night, does McVay give him more snaps? We will have to see going forward. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds, another guy who's been playing really, really well lately. Didn't really do anything on Monday night. 3 for 32 receiving on 6 receptions. And that's a wrap for the Week 12 Waiver Wire show. Once again, my name is Dylan Burd here on the Sports Burd Podcast. And if you don't follow me on Twitter already, be sure to follow me at sports_Burd. Also, reminder to smash the like button on this video if you haven't already, and be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Goodbye, everyone, and good luck with your waiver wire bids this week.